When I walked into the courtroom that morning, my daughter Emily rolled her eyes and whispered something dismissive to her husband, Mark. But then, something extraordinary happened. The judge looked up from his papers, his eyes met mine, and he froze completely. The pen in his hand hovered over a document, motionless. A hush fell over the room as he leaned forward and murmured, in a voice of pure disbelief, "It's her. It's really her." The entire courtroom fell silent. None of them, not my daughter, not my conniving son-in-law, had any idea who I really was until that moment. That trial changed everything. My name is Eleanor. I'm 69 years old, and until a few months ago, I was just a regular, everyday grandma living in a quiet suburb of Chicago. My life was a tapestry woven from simple, predictable threads. Each morning, I woke at 6, the same time I had for 40 years, and brewed coffee in the same chipped ceramic mug my late husband, Richard, had given me on our 10th anniversary. I'd stand by the kitchen window, watering the African violets he loved so much, watching the sun rise over the neat lawns of our neighborhood. It was a life of small, comforting rituals that gave me a sense of peace in the quiet house. For 45 years, I was the mother who sacrificed everything for my only daughter, Emily. I worked nights cleaning office buildings, my hands raw from chemical cleansers so she could have piano lessons. I sold homemade cupcakes at local bake sales on weekends, the smell of sugar and vanilla a permanent fixture in our home, all so she could go to a good college and have the life I never had. I sewed her prom dress by hand, pricking my fingers countless times to make sure every stitch was perfect. When she married Mark, an arrogant marketing manager who never offered a kind word and always looked at me as if I were a piece of outdated furniture, I swallowed my pride. I welcomed them into my house every Sunday for dinner, setting the table with my best china and plastering on my best smile, enduring his condescending remarks about my home, my cooking, and my simple life. I thought that after Richard passed away, Emily and I would grow closer, finding solace in our shared grief. How naive I was. Instead of finding comfort in each other's company, my daughter began to see me as a burden, an obligation. Her visits became perfunctory and cold, her calls less frequent. Her excuses for avoiding me grew more and more creative, each one a small, sharp pinprick to my already aching heart. The greatest humiliation of my life came on a gray, overcast Thursday in October. I had spent the entire day preparing a chicken pot pie, her favorite since childhood, the kind with a flaky, buttery crust that took hours to perfect but always made her smile. I set out my best tablecloth, the one with the delicate floral embroidery I had done when she was a teenager, and even bought fresh daisies for the centerpiece. When they arrived, Mark strode into my house as if he already owned it, slumped into Richard's worn leather armchair, and switched on the television to a sports game without so much as a hello. Emily wore a stylish green dress I had bought her for her birthday, but her expression was as cold and bleak as a Chicago winter. "Mom, we need to talk," she said, her voice laced with an unfamiliar clinical tone she'd developed since marrying Mark. It was the voice of a stranger. She sat on the edge of the sofa, perched as if ready to flee at a moment's notice. "Mark and I have made a decision," she continued, while he remained glued to the screen, grunting occasionally at the game. "This house, it's just too big for you. You can't possibly maintain it all by yourself anymore. And, well, we need a bigger place. For when we have kids." She finally glanced at me, her eyes devoid of warmth. "We found the perfect retirement community for people your age. It's called Maple Creek Senior Living." I felt as if the floor had opened up beneath me, threatening to swallow me whole. This was the house where Emily had taken her first steps, her tiny hand clutching my finger. This was where we had celebrated every birthday, with homemade cakes and colorful balloons. This was the room where her father had passed away, holding my hand, his last breath a whisper of my name. Every corner held our most sacred memories. Every photograph on the mantelpiece told the story of our lives together. "But Emily, this is our home," I pleaded, my voice trembling so violently I could barely form the words. "All our memories are here." "Memories are in the heart, Mom, not in the walls," she replied, the cliché delivered with a coldness that chilled me to the bone. "Besides, the community has activities. For people like you, you'll be better off there. You'll have company your own age." Mark, sensing a victory, finally turned from the TV, a smug smile playing on his lips. He started looking around the room, his eyes measuring the walls as if he were already picking out paint colors. "It's for the best, Eleanor," he added, using my first name with a familiarity that felt like an insult. "We'll take care of all the paperwork. Don't you worry about a thing." My heart, which had endured the loss of my husband, now shattered into 1,000 pieces. My own daughter, the child for whom I had sacrificed my youth, my health, and my dreams, was casually, cruelly, throwing me out of my own home to give it to this despicable man. Tears threatened to fall, but I blinked them back, swallowing the lump in my throat. I would not give them the satisfaction of seeing me cry. I need time to think," I murmured, clutching what little dignity I had left. "There's not much to think about, Mom," Emily replied, standing up and smoothing down her dress. "It's already decided. They're coming to appraise the house next week." And with that, they left. They left my chicken pot pie untouched on the counter, my flowers wilting on the table, and my heart in pieces on the floor, where we had once been a happy family. That night, sleep was a stranger. I sat in the dark kitchen, staring at the photographs on the wall. Emily as a baby, chubby and smiling in my arms. Emily on her first day of school, her backpack almost as big as she was. Emily at her college graduation, her face beaming with pride. In every picture, I was there, holding her, hugging her, smiling by her side. How had it come to this? How had the girl who once told me I was her hero now treat me like a piece of garbage to be disposed of? The story I'm telling you is a painful one, but it's real. If you've ever felt overlooked or betrayed, I hope my journey gives you strength. The channel is called Aunt Millie's Tales, and we believe in the power of stories to connect us. Please take a moment to like this video and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss how this story unfolds. Your support means the world. Now, let me tell you what happened next. The following days were a living nightmare. True to their word, Mark brought a real estate appraiser without any warning. He was a man in a drab gray suit who walked through my home as if it were a museum exhibit, an object for sale. He took notes on a clipboard, measured rooms, and talked loudly about market potential and necessary renovations as if I weren't even there. Emily accompanied him, nodding at every disparaging comment about the home her father had lovingly maintained for decades. "The pipes are old," the appraiser declared, his voice echoing in the quiet hall. "And these kitchen tiles are hopelessly dated. You'd have to gut the whole thing." My husband had laid those tiles with his own hands the summer Emily turned 10. Each one represented hours of his hard work, his love, and his hope for our future. But to them, they were just obstacles to their new, upgraded life. The humiliation reached its nadir when Emily came over a few days later, armed with glossy brochures for Maple Creek Senior Living. "Look, Mom, it has beautiful gardens, and they have bingo on Tuesdays," she said, her voice dripping with fake enthusiasm. a tone she used when she wanted to convince me of something against my will. Plus, there's a nurse on duty 24/7. You'll be safer there. Safer? I had lived in this house for over 30 years without a single problem. I knew all my neighbors by name. I had my routines, my garden, my memories. But to Emily, none of that mattered. All that mattered was getting me out of her way. The day I least expected it, they arrived with papers. Mark walked in, followed by Emily and a stern-looking man who introduced himself as their lawyer. Eleanor, we have all the documents prepared for the transfer of the property. We just need your signature. Transfer? I asked, confused. I thought you were going to sell the house. Emily refused to meet my gaze. Well, Mark and I decided to keep it. It's better for the family to hold on to properties. That's when I understood everything. It wasn't just that they wanted me out. They wanted to steal my house, the legacy Richard and I had built with so much effort. It was a robbery disguised as filial concern. I'm not signing anything, I said, my voice firmer than I thought possible. Mark stood up abruptly, his friendly facade melting away to reveal the aggression he had always kept hidden when Richard was alive. Ma'am, you're no longer in a condition to make these decisions. Emily is your only heir, and she is acting in your best interest. This is my house, I yelled, surprising myself with my own strength. And I am not leaving. Mom, don't make this harder, Emily murmured, finally showing a flicker of discomfort. You know you can't keep living alone. Last week, you forgot to turn off the gas stove. It was a blatant lie. I had never forgotten to turn off the stove in my life. But Mark smiled, a predatory gleam in his eyes, as if he had just found the perfect excuse. See, Emily? Your mother isn't well. It's dangerous to leave her alone. The lawyer cleared his throat. Ma'am, if you don't sign voluntarily, we may have to explore other legal options. A mental incapacity proceeding, for instance. The world closed in on me. My own daughter was willing to have me declared legally incompetent just to steal my house. The man I had accepted as a son-in-law was threatening me in my own living room, and I, a 69-year-old woman, was completely alone against them. I need time, I muttered, defeated. You have 1 week, Mark said coldly. Then we'll do what we have to do. When they left, I collapsed into Richard's armchair and cried as I hadn't since his funeral. I cried for the daughter I had lost, for the home they were taking from me, for the life that was crumbling around me. I felt betrayed, humiliated, and utterly defenseless. That night, for the first time in my life, I considered giving up. Maybe they were right. Maybe I was too old, too weak, too useless to fight. But then, as I sat there in the dark, something inside me, a small, stubborn flame of dignity that had been flickering, refused to die. I wasn't going to let them trample all over me without a fight. The next day, Emily came back alone. For a fleeting moment, my heart filled with a foolish hope. Maybe she had reconsidered. Mom, I came to help you pack, she said, her voice robotic. I brought boxes. We can start with your clothes. I stared at her, searching for any trace of the girl I had raised, but I only found a cold, calculating stranger. Emily, please. This is because I love you, Mom, she replied, not looking me in the eye. I want what's best for you. Love. This was love, stripping me of my home, my dignity, everything I had left. She began packing my belongings as if they were worthless objects. She shoved my family photos carelessly into boxes, packed the books Richard had given me, the dishes from my wedding china. This old dress, Mom. I don't think you need it, she said, holding up the dress I wore to my husband's funeral. Leave it, I begged, but she had already tossed it in a donation bag. My pain didn't matter. The final straw was when she found my jewelry box. Inside were my wedding ring, the pearl earrings Richard had given me for our 20th anniversary, and a small gold locket that had belonged to my mother. "This will be safer in a safe deposit box," Emily said, putting the whole box into her purse. "It could get lost at the community." "Those are mine!" I yelled, trying to snatch the purse from her. "Mom, you're getting hysterical," she said, her voice sickeningly calm. "This just proves you can't take care of yourself." In that moment, I knew I had lost her forever. The Emily I knew was gone, replaced by this heartless woman, blinded by greed and manipulated by her husband. That night, after she left, I walked through my half-empty house like a ghost. I couldn't eat. I couldn't sleep. I sat on the floor, surrounded by open boxes and scattered memories, and wondered how it had all come to this. What was essential? How could an entire lifetime be reduced to what was essential? In a daze, I went to my husband's old desk in the study, a place I hadn't touched much since he passed. I opened a drawer, looking for anything, a familiar scent, a forgotten note, to connect me to better times. I found old letters, paid bills, and some documents I had never looked at. Tucked in the very back was a small, locked wooden box I had never seen before. It was marked with Richard's initials. Curious and desperate, I looked for the key. I finally found it inside an old book on investments, marking a page. With trembling hands, I inserted the key and opened the box. My world changed forever. Inside, I found documents I didn't fully understand at first, but one caught my attention immediately. It was a will, dated just 6 months before Richard's death, a will I had never seen. My hands trembled as I read. My quiet, modest husband, the man I thought I knew completely, had been far more far-sighted than I ever imagined. The document revealed that Richard hadn't just been a modest office worker. For decades, he had been quietly and brilliantly investing every extra dime he earned. He had bought small properties when prices were low. He had invested in tech startups that were now worth a fortune. He had accumulated a wealth I never could have imagined in my wildest dreams. But that wasn't all. The will clearly specified that I, Eleanor, was the sole heir to everything. Emily would only receive a small trust fund upon my death, and only if she had taken care of me with love and respect during my final years. My husband had been wiser than I thought. He had seen something in Mark that I, in my motherly blindness, had refused to recognize. Then came a clause that took my breath away. My husband was the legal owner of the entire apartment building where Emily and Mark lived. The apartment they thought they were paying rent on each month was, in fact, mine. All the tenants in that building were paying rent to a property management company that deposited the money directly into an account I knew nothing about. With shaking fingers, I searched through the papers until I found the bank statements. The amount was astronomical. For 2 years since Richard's death, I had been living like a poor widow while a fortune was accumulating in my name. There were more surprises. Richard owned a significant stake in the marketing company where Mark worked. Not just minor shares, but enough to influence board decisions. There were also investments in local restaurants, small businesses, and a large piece of land on the outskirts of the city that was now worth millions. I read and reread every document. Everything was there, perfectly organized and legally sound. My husband had built a silent empire, and I was its empress without even knowing it. But what impacted me most was a personal letter I found at the very bottom of the box, in Richard's familiar handwriting, addressed to me. "My dearest Eleanor," the letter began, "if you are reading this, It means I am no longer with you, and you have found this nest egg I built for you. Forgive me for not telling you while I was alive, but I wanted it to be a surprise for your golden years. You always worked so hard. You always sacrificed so much for Emily and me, and I wanted to make sure you would never want for anything. Tears began to roll down my cheeks as I continued reading. I must also confess, I never fully trusted Mark. There is an ambition in him that worries me. That's why I structured everything this way. If Emily takes care of you and respects you as you deserve, she will have a comfortable life. But if she ever treats you badly or tries to take advantage of you, you now have all the power to protect yourself. My husband had foreseen exactly what was happening. He had seen right through Mark from the very beginning and had prepared my defense before he died. Use this power wisely, my love. The letter concluded, not to hurt, but to protect yourself and to teach. Deep down, Emily is a good person. She's just lost. But if you need to defend yourself, you now have the tools to do it. All my love, for all eternity, Richard. I sat on the floor of my living room, surrounded by documents worth millions, crying for the wise, wonderful man I had lost, and for the daughter I was about to confront. But for the first time in months, they weren't tears of defeat. They were tears of gratitude, of hope, and yes, of a quiet, simmering satisfaction. Emily and Mark thought they were stripping me of everything. They had no idea that I owned the building they lived in, the company where he worked, and properties all over the state. They thought they were throwing me out of my little house, not knowing that this house was the least valuable thing I owned. That night, I didn't sleep. But for the first time in weeks, it wasn't because of sadness. It was because my mind was working, planning, calculating. Richard had given me more than money. He had given me power. And now, I had to decide how to use it. Monday morning arrived with a light rain tapping against the windows. Emily and Mark showed up early with the movers, expecting to find me packed and ready to be shipped off to Maple Creek. Instead, they found me sitting calmly in my favorite armchair, sipping tea as if it were any other day. "Mom, what are you doing? The movers are here," Emily said, her voice edged with the impatience that had become her default tone. "I'm not leaving," I replied, my voice imbued with a calm that surprised even me. Mark stepped forward, flashing that threatening smile I knew so well. "Eleanor, we already talked about this. You don't have a choice." I looked him straight in the eye, for the first time not as a timid mother-in-law, but as his equal, or rather, his superior. "You're right, Mark. I don't have a choice, but it turns out neither do you." Something in my tone must have alerted them because Emily came closer, a worried expression on her face. "What are you talking about, Mom?" "I'm talking about the fact that I've just discovered something very interesting about my financial situation," I said, taking another slow sip of tea. "But don't worry. You'll understand everything soon." They looked at me with that familiar expression of pity they reserved for when they thought I was being senile. But I was no longer the same scared woman from the week before. I had a plan, and I had the power to execute it. "Mom, enough with the games," Emily said with irritation. "The movers are waiting. They have other jobs." "Then they can leave," I replied calmly, "because they're not moving a single thing out of this house." Mark stood up abruptly. "Ma'am, I don't think you understand the situation. You no longer have a say in this matter." "On the contrary, Mark. I think it's you who doesn't understand the situation," I said, slowly getting up from my chair. I walked to the desk where I had left a few select documents I had found. Not all of them, just the ones I needed for this conversation. "Did you know," I began, my voice steady, "that your apartment, The one you've been living in for 3 years has never had its rent paid to the actual owner? Emily frowned. What are you talking about? We pay it every single month. Yes, but you pay it to a property management company. A company that, in turn, deposits that money directly to me. Because, you see, I own the entire building. The silence that followed was deafening. Mark was the first to react, with a short, nervous laugh. That's impossible. You live on a measly pension. I lived on a pension because I chose to, I replied, savoring every second of their stunned confusion. My husband was much smarter than any of us ever imagined. I held out one of the property deeds. Emily took it with a trembling hand and read it. Once, twice, 3 times. This can't be real, she murmured, her face pale. It's as real as the fact that you were throwing me out of my own house to take it for yourselves, I said. But it turns out, this house is the least valuable thing I own. Mark snatched the document from Emily's hands. His face turned ashen as he read. This has to be fake, a forged document. You can verify it whenever you like, I said with a smile I hadn't felt in months. In fact, I encourage you to do so. Emily collapsed onto the sofa as if her legs had given out. Why didn't you ever tell us anything? Because I didn't know myself until 3 days ago. Your father kept this secret to protect me. What a visionary he was. Mark began to pace the room like a caged animal, clearly agitated. This changes everything. He turned to Emily. If your mother really owns the building, it means she can evict us whenever she wants? Along with all the other tenants who have been paying me on time for the past 2 years. I completed the sentence for him. You can't do that, Emily said, her voice cracking. We're family. Family. The word came out of my mouth with more bitterness than I intended. Like when you were going to have me declared mentally incompetent to steal my house? Like when you packed my memories away as if they were trash? Like when you took my mother's jewelry? Emily began to cry, but they were no longer the manipulative tears she had learned to use. They were tears of genuine terror. Mom, please, we can fix this. It was all Mark's idea. Emily, Mark yelled, furious that she was blaming him. It's true, she continued, ignoring him. He convinced me it was for the best. He said you were losing your memory, that you couldn't take care of yourself. And you believed him? I asked, feeling my heart break all over again. Do you know your own mother so little that you believed him over your own intuition? The movers, who had been waiting awkwardly at the entrance, came closer, confused. Excuse me, ma'am? Are we taking the stuff or not? No, I replied firmly. Nothing is being moved today. You can go. After they left, Mark came closer to me, his face contorted with the aggression he had always kept hidden. This isn't over, old lady. We're going to challenge those documents. We're going to prove they're fake. Go right ahead, I said, unfazed. In the meantime, I hope you have enough money saved to find somewhere else to live. Because on the 1st of next month, you're going to receive a formal eviction notice. You can't do this to us, he yelled, completely losing his composure. I can, and I will. But don't worry, I'll be fair. I'll give you the 30 days that the law allows. Emily stood up abruptly from the sofa. Mom, please, you have to understand. Mark told me. He told me that if I didn't convince you to move, he would leave me. He said he couldn't stand living knowing you were here alone, being a danger to yourself. And that justifies everything you did to me? I asked. It justifies treating me like trash, taking your grandmother's locket? I'll give it back to you right now, she said, desperately searching through her purse. It's too late for that, Emily. Mark came closer again, but this time his attitude was different. He was no longer threatening, but almost pleading, the mask of a manipulator. Eleanor, we can come to an agreement. Emily's pregnant. Are you really going to throw your own grandchild out on the street? I felt as if I had been punched in the stomach. Emily was pregnant, and she hadn't told me. I was going to be a grandmother, and I was finding out as a piece of blackmail. Is it true? I asked Emily, my voice barely a whisper. She nodded through her tears. I wanted to tell you in a different way. I wanted it to be a special surprise. Like the surprise of throwing me out of my house? I replied, though I felt my resolve beginning to waver. But then I remembered Richard's words in his letter. Not to hurt, but to protect yourself and to teach. Emily needed to learn, and her son or daughter deserved to grow up with different values than the ones Mark was teaching. The news of the pregnancy disarmed me for a moment, but then I remembered all the pain. A baby didn't erase the humiliation, the contempt, the months of suffering. Congratulations on the baby, Emily, I said, my voice calmer than I felt. But that doesn't change what you did. Mom, please, she pleaded, think about your grandchild. Do you really want them to grow up without knowing their grandma? Their grandma was here all along. I replied, you were the ones who decided to get rid of me. Mark tried one last manipulation. Eleanor, if you really have as much money as you say, why don't you help us instead of punishing us? We could be a united family. I looked at him with the contempt he deserved. A united family? Like when you threatened to have me declared incompetent? Like when you turned my daughter against me? I never— Quiet, Mark, I interrupted him with an authority I didn't know I possessed. I have heard enough of your lies. The tension in the house was thick enough to cut with a knife. Emily cried silently. Mark paced like a caged tiger, and I felt strangely calm for the first time in months. Here's what's going to happen, I announced. You have 30 days to find somewhere else to live. During that time, I don't want to see you around here. And after that? Emily asked, her voice broken. After that, we'll see if you've learned anything about respect. Mark exploded. This is emotional blackmail. You're using your money to manipulate us. The word made me laugh, a bitter, hollow sound. Manipulation? Like when you used my supposed mental incompetence to manipulate me? Like when you used my mother's love to blackmail me? It's different, Mark murmured, but he didn't even sound convincing to himself. You're right, I admitted. It is different. Because I actually have the power I'm using. I walked to the desk and took out more documents. The bank statements, the property deeds, the stock certificates. I laid them on the dining room table one by one until the surface was covered with irrefutable proof of my fortune. Dawn came closer and began to examine the papers with trembling hands. Oh my God, Mom, this is real. It's all real. Very real, I confirmed. And now you understand why your husband is so desperate to discredit me. Dave tried one last gambit. Emily, you can't believe your mother hid all this for years. She's a liar. No! Emily suddenly yelled, surprising us all. Stop it, Mark. Just stop. She turned to me, tears streaming down her cheeks. Mom, forgive me. Forgive me for everything. You're right. I treated you like trash. I let him convince me you were a burden. Emily, don't listen to her. Mark tried, but she ignored him completely. He filled my head with lies about your health, about the dangers of you living alone. He made me feel guilty for leaving you here when all you wanted was to be in your home. Emily, be quiet, Mark ordered her, but it was too late. Don't you ever tell me to be quiet again? She yelled at him, her voice filled with a strength I hadn't heard in years. I'm sick of your manipulations, sick of you using me to hurt my mother. The silence that followed was absolute. For the first time in years, Emily had defended me. Dave looked at her with a coldness that chilled me to the bone. If you choose your mother over me, Emily, this relationship is over. Emily stood motionless for a moment, processing the ultimatum. Then, to my utter astonishment, she straightened her shoulders and looked him directly in the eyes. Then it's over, she said, her voice clear and strong. Dave was paralyzed, as if he couldn't believe what he had just heard. For years, he had controlled her every move, and now she had said no. You're not serious, he murmured. You're pregnant. You can't raise a child alone. I won't be alone, Emily replied, looking at me with something that resembled the love I remembered. I have my mother, but I wasn't ready to forgive so easily. The months of humiliation, the sleepless nights, the feeling of having lost my only daughter, all of that didn't just disappear with a few words. Emily, I said softly, I appreciate that you finally opened your eyes, but this doesn't fix everything. Her face fell. Mom, please. I know I don't deserve your forgiveness, but I'm willing to do whatever it takes. Dave, seeing he was losing control, adopted a different tactic. He suddenly knelt in front of me, a look of fake repentance on his face. Eleanor, you're right. It was all my fault. Please, forgive me. I looked down at him, feeling a mixture of satisfaction and disgust. It was pathetic to see him grovel. You're asking for forgiveness now, Dave? When you discover I'm not the poor, helpless old woman you thought I was? I was wrong. He continued his performance. Let me make it up to you. We can be a happy family. A happy family? I repeated. Like when you called me a manipulative old woman 5 minutes ago? Dave swallowed hard. I was upset. I didn't know what I was saying. No, I said firmly. You knew exactly what you were saying? You were showing your true face. I turned to Emily. And you, for months, you treated me like a nuisance. Do you think an apology erases all that? No, she admitted, her voice cracking. I know I can't erase what I did. But I can try to make things right, starting now. She looked at Dave, then back at me. By leaving him, by leaving this man who convinced me to betray the only person who has ever loved me unconditionally. Dave stood up abruptly. You can't be serious. You're having my child. I am having my child, Emily retorted, with a determination that filled me with a glimmer of pride. A child I don't want growing up watching his father manipulate and mistreat his grandmother. You're making the biggest mistake of your life, Dave threatened. The biggest mistake of my life was marrying you, she shot back. He looked at us both with pure hatred. This isn't over. I'm going to fight for custody. I'm going to prove that you're both crazy. With what money are you going to fight? I asked calmly. Because tomorrow morning, I'm going to have a little chat with your boss. Did you know I own enough shares in your company to influence personnel decisions? Dave's face turned completely white. You wouldn't dare. After everything you've done? Of course I would. He stormed to the door, but stopped before leaving. This doesn't end here, he said, his voice full of venom. I'm going to destroy you. Go ahead and try. I replied, unfazed. But do it from somewhere else, because you have exactly 1 hour to get your things out of my building? 1 hour? You said we had 30 days. That was when Emily was with you. Now that she's on her own, there's no reason for you to keep living on my property. He slammed the door behind him, making the whole house tremble. Emily and I were left alone, surrounded by a heavy silence. "Mom," she murmured after a long while, "can you ever forgive me?" I looked at her, this 30-year-old woman who had just had her world turned upside down. "I don't know, Emily," I replied honestly. "You hurt me a lot." "I know," she whispered, "and I'm going to spend the rest of my life trying to make it up to you." She stayed in her old room that night. The next few days were strange and tense. We moved around the house like polite strangers. But I was watching, and what I saw gave me hope. For the first time in years, Emily was doing things for herself. She washed her dishes, kept her room spotless, and helped with chores without being asked. One afternoon, she came to me. "I've been thinking," she began. "It wasn't just Mark. I allowed him to change me. It was easier to believe you were the problem than to face the fact that I had married the wrong man." Each day, a new revelation came out. How Mark had isolated her from her friends, controlled their finances, and convinced her to quit her job. My daughter had been suffering in silence while I thought she was happy. 2 months later, the day of the trial arrived. Mark had made good on his threat, suing for full custody, claiming I was a manipulative influence. "Mom, I'm scared," Emily confessed as we got ready. "What if the judge believes him?" "We have the truth on our side," I assured her, though my own heart was pounding. We arrived at the courthouse. Mark was already there, looking smug. His lawyer began his argument, painting me as a vengeful woman who had used her newfound wealth to destroy a marriage. When it was our turn, our lawyer, Victoria, calmly presented the evidence. Text messages, recordings of his threats, testimonies from neighbors. But the decisive moment came when the judge looked up and stared at me. "Mrs. Eleanor Williams?" he asked, his voice filled with disbelief. "Yes, Your Honor," I replied, confused. The judge took off his glasses. "Did you, by any chance, work at the family court clerk's office about 30 years ago?" My heart stopped. "Yes, Your Honor. I was a secretary for Judge Patterson." "I knew it," he said, a slow smile spreading across his face. "You helped me when I was just a terrified legal intern. You taught me how to organize case files. You brought me coffee when I worked late. You were always kind to me when everyone else treated me like I was invisible." The entire courtroom fell silent. Emily looked at me in amazement. Mark turned pale. "Your Honor, I am Judge Robert Miller," the judge continued. "Do you remember me?" And then I saw it. Under the gray hair and the black robe was the shy, earnest young man I had taken under my wing decades ago. The boy I had defended from bullying lawyers, the one I had encouraged when he doubted his own abilities. "Rob," I murmured, my eyes filling with tears. "Of course I remember you." The judge smiled. "I never forgot your kindness, Eleanor. You told me that one day I would be a great judge, even when I didn't believe it myself." Mark's lawyer jumped up. "Your Honor, I believe this constitutes a conflict of interest." "There is no conflict, Counselor," Judge Miller replied, his voice firm as steel. "There is only justice. And after reviewing all the evidence presented, it is abundantly clear that Mr. Mark Thompson has been the only manipulator in this story." The verdict was resounding. Mark lost all parental rights and was issued a restraining order. He also had to pay all legal costs. As we left the courthouse, Emily hugged me tightly. "Mom, how is it possible the judge knew you?" "Life has a funny way of coming full circle, honey," I replied, squeezing her hand. "And kindness always comes back to you, especially when you least expect it." 6 months later, when my granddaughter Serenity was born, I knew everything had been worth it. Emily had become the loving, strong mother I always knew she could be. One afternoon, as we rocked the baby in the garden, she asked me the question I had been waiting for. "Mom, have you really forgiven me?" I looked at her, this woman who had grown so much, who had learned to value what was truly important. "I forgive you, Emily," I said finally. "But more importantly, you've learned to forgive yourself." That night, I thought about Richard and his letter. I had used the power he left me exactly as he had hoped. Not to hurt, but to protect and to teach. 5 years after the trial, my life had transformed. Serenity, now a chatty 4-year-old, ran through the garden while Emily and I prepared Sunday lunch. In the years that passed, Emily had gone back to school and become an accountant. She had blossomed. A letter arrived that day. It was from the foundation I had established with part of Richard's inheritance. The Eleanor Project had become a refuge for elderly women suffering from familial abuse or abandonment. We were about to open our third home. We had helped over 50 women rebuild their lives. The doorbell rang. It was retired Judge Robert Miller and his wife. He had come to tell me that the Retired Judges Association was giving me an award for my work with the foundation. "Your story inspired many of us, Eleanor," he said. "It reminded us what true justice is all about." After they left, Emily and I sat on the porch. "You know what I admire most about you, Mom?" she asked. "That after everything, you never let it make you bitter." "Oh, I got bitter," I admitted. "But your father taught me that true power isn't in revenge. It's in the ability to transform pain into something useful for others." Serenity came running up to me, her cheeks rosy. "Grandma, will you tell me the story of the brave queen?" It was her favorite story, a child's version of what had happened, where the grandma discovered magical powers to protect her family from a greedy dragon. "Happily ever after?" Serenity asked when I finished. I looked around. My daughter was happy and whole. My granddaughter was safe in my arms. My foundation was helping others find their own strength. "Yes, my love," I replied, kissing the top of her head. "Happily ever after." That night, I sat in my favorite armchair, reading letters from the women we had helped. Each one was a confirmation that my experience had served a purpose far bigger than my own pain. I had learned the most important lesson of all. It is never too late to stand up for yourself, never too late to change your story. And I had found something worth more than all the money in the world. The peace of knowing I had used my second chance wisely.